What if big pharma knows something that we don't, and they're not being honest? And I'm not making that accusation. You have to be, as I said, regardless of your beliefs right now, you have to be open to that possibility. But on the other side of it, you have to realize that the Maha movement in and of itself has to succeed. They came out with some very bold claims and this very controversial appointment, and a lot of controversial appointments actually. So they've got a lot of people who are dependent on the outcome. And that's a scary thing when we're talking about healthcare. Hey, welcome to this short episode of the Build Beyond podcast. Recently, the federal government came out with some statements about autism and the potential effects of Tylenol while pregnant. And before I say anything about this, I want to make it very clear that I am a chiropractor and that giving advice or recommendations or commenting in any critical way on medication and trying to push anyone in any specific direction is outside of my scope of practice. And that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm more so talking to you today just as a person, not necessarily a healthcare provider, because I feel like this is really confusing. And my goal is to get a physician on the podcast or multiple physicians to have a discussion from people who actually prescribe these medications. So I am kind of using this as a teaser, as a prequel. So if anyone's listening to this or you're watching this and you know a physician who would be really good or might want to talk about this on my podcast, reach out to me and let me know, and I'll ask them. I have a couple people in mind, and I'm actually going to send this episode. So maybe that'll convince them or entice them to want to be on the podcast. I realize this is kind of a spicy topic, and some people might not really want to weigh in on video. So I get that. But I have questions. So on this topic, just as an individual person and not speaking as a licensed healthcare provider, I'm split and I see both sides of it. So we have one side that's really skeptical and saying, what if things like Tylenol have these adverse effects? And I don't think it's hard, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, I don't think it's hard to see this perspective, this skepticism, because I think big tobacco is a good example. When I was a kid, you could smoke in restaurants, you could smoke on airplanes, maybe not airplanes. I don't think I'm that old, but you could definitely smoke in restaurants, and smoking indoors was a thing. And if you go back far enough, you could smoke on planes. You could smoke in hospitals. Not only was smoking accepted, but I think if you look at some of the older advertisements and recommendations, it was actually deemed to be quite safe. And now I think in this time, we can look back at those practices and those recommendations, and we think, oh, that's pretty silly. I can't believe they didn't know. But you got to think that back then, although the information existed to a certain extent, it wasn't made readily available. And I think that was the big controversy with big tobacco, is that for a lengthy period of time, they knew that there was a link to cancer and they did not release that information. They weren't upfront about it. And a lot of people were hurt by that. So from one side of it, I can see, because I can sit on that side of the fence and I could say, well, what if this is something similar? What if big pharma knows something that we don't, and they're not being honest? And I'm not making that accusation. You have to be, as I said, regardless of your beliefs right now, you have to be open to that possibility. But on the other side of it, you have to realize that the Maha movement in and of itself has to succeed. They came out with some very bold claims and this very controversial appointment, and a lot of controversial appointments actually. So they've got a lot of people who are dependent on the outcome. And that's a scary thing when we're talking about healthcare and when we're talking about research. if you're going to conduct an experiment or you're going to do some type of review of data, so you're going to look at the broad spectrum of research that's out there, you want people looking at that and analyzing it and performing these experiments who are not tied to the outcome. That people who are just going to look at the data and let the data speak. And that, I'm afraid we don't have that right now. I'm afraid that MAHA, to a certain extent, at the end of this movement, they can't just say, well, I guess there was nothing to find. I think we were good, our bad. They can't do that. And just politically, they can't do it. And so again, it sounds like I'm maybe accusing them of things I'm not. But I think regardless of where you sit, you have to acknowledge that there's some huge political pressure there. And we also have to acknowledge that, right now we've got big pharma over here and maybe politics over here, and they're not syncing up. But a lot of times they do. So big pharma, the money and the influence definitely affects politics, and politics definitely affects the money and the influence of big pharma. So I guess what I'm feeling right now as an individual, I feel like I'm watching a tennis match and the outcome has already been determined. It's rigged. And I don't know that. So we're all sitting here on the edge of our seats watching this thinking, who's going to win? We don't know. We don't know how this is going to come out. And we're just watching this ball back and forth, back and forth. And the whole time that the organizers of the tournament, the people who are playing or on the court, they all know everything. They know the score, and they're not telling us. They're putting on this, it feels like a show, like an act. And it's very confusing. It's very frustrating, especially as a parent. And I think maybe that's why I'm speaking as a parent right now more than, I'm speaking 100% as a parent right now, not as a healthcare provider. Because again, I can't weigh in on this as a chiropractor, and I don't really want to, and it would be unethical for me to do it. But the interesting thing is my patients have these questions. My patients have kids, and my patients want to know what I think, and they want clarity. And some of them, they have really good primary care physicians who they trust, who will have these conversations with them. Some of them have really good primary care physicians who just don't have time to have these conversations. That's why I would really like for a long form discussion, especially from some physicians within our community, to be able to talk about this. We could spend hours talking about it so that they can kind of work through this, and people in our community could listen to them talk about both sides of it and maybe start to understand at a deeper level. But I feel lost right now as a parent, and I feel lost as a healthcare provider who doesn't know a lot about medication. And to be quite fair, things like over-the-counter medication, my patients care about them because they can just go access them. And I care about it because if it's causing harm to my patients, I want them to have the information to make a different decision. Or if there are pros and cons, and the pros might outweigh the cons, I want them to be able to make an informed decision. I can't give them that information. And if they go to the internet, it's so hard to filter through. And there's not a lot of nuance when you're reading articles or asking ChatGPT or getting on Google or you're on Instagram. There's just no, or TikTok. There's really very little nuance there. So I think having a long form discussion about this is really important. Another topic that I've been working on, trying to get someone on about it, is talking about Ozempic. So the Ozempic is a brand name of the GLP-1s, but essentially they're these weight loss drugs. And I see both sides of this, and I'm really actually interested in it from a pediatric standpoint. Because right now, as I'm recording this, our county fair is going on. And I went yesterday with my kids, and it's hard not to notice the large number of children who are carrying extra body weight. And it's not a judgment, it's an observation. And I can't help but wonder, since things like Ozempic technically and seem to be working quite well for weight loss. Is this a direction that we're going to go? And again, this topic is really divided. This is spicy right now, and I can't really weigh in on it because I listen to a lot of podcasts where physicians talk about it, and I hear the pros of it, because if you're a cardiologist or you're dealing with people who need to lose weight, diabetics, any kind of metabolic issue, you can very quickly help someone drop body weight with a medication. It could save their life. So I totally get that. And so I see that side of it. But then I also see the other side of it, where people are saying, well, is this just the new opioid crisis? Are we just, are there really bad things about these medications that we're only going to find out about in 10, 20 years, once it's too late, once we've ruined a generation of people? So it's another one of those topics where I can't really weigh in, and I do see both sides, and I want someone to come on and talk about that as well. And maybe these are two separate episodes, but I think conceptually we could probably roll this up into one long episode where, how do we as people who did not go to medical school, who are not up to date on all the latest research, how are we to make sense of this, and who are we to believe, and who are we to listen to? And is my analogy of this rigged tennis match, am I out of line? I don't know. But that's what it feels like. It feels like, I don't know. It just feels set up. And it feels like a lot of the information and the questions that, a lot of the information that we want, and a lot of the questions that we're asking, it just feels like the answers are out there and we're not being told. And maybe that's not true. I don't know. I think that's why it would be awesome to have a physician on, or multiple physicians. Maybe this is a multiple episode kind of thing, because I just have a ton of questions, and my patients have a ton of questions. And I want to be able to direct my patients to people who are going to give them good quality answers, and people who are going to explain stuff to them. So those are my thoughts. And yeah, I don't know. I'm sending this, I'm going to publish this ASAP, and I'm sending it to some physicians who I know, some friends of mine. Hopefully I'll get them on. Like I said, if you're watching this or you're listening to this and you know someone who you think would be a good fit for this type of discussion, they can have a very extreme opinion. I want to hear it. I'm really curious. Maybe I need to get multiple people on at once, or we can do people individually, but I think these are important topics. So I don't know. This podcast is designed to challenge and guide you so that you can reach your full potential. And this is one of those very specific areas where I can't challenge and guide you. It's just not within my scope of practice. Excuse me. But it is so important. And if I can't personally and professionally challenge and guide you, I would like to provide you with resources that I've vetted, and at least you have information then, and you can do what you want with that and make those decisions. So thanks for listening. Let me know, and look forward to one of those episodes, hopefully by soon. Maybe I'll record one next week. So, all right. Thanks for listening.